Hi, everyone. Welcome to the first current history quick take of the new year. Hope everyone had a great holidays. It's been so far an incredibly eventful first week of 2026. I did my 2025 year in review just a couple of weeks ago, and I noted on there it seemed that things have been kind of settling into a predictable pattern in this administration, and that has proven to completely blown up in my face as a prediction. So I've really tried to take the time to think about what has happened in Venezuela. What I'm really going to focus on here is policy efficacy. I'm really going to try to put aside a lot of these ethical, moral, legal questions because I'm not trained as a lawyer. I don't know if I'm necessarily the best to address those. How I really want to approach this is what is U.S. interests and what is the best way to go about securing them without the various blowback and drawback. And that to me has been a major drawback of U.S. policy is considering, okay, how does action A affect action B and then action C, and what are the costs and benefits of those actions, rather than focusing narrowly on what's in front of us. And so with Venezuela, I think there was a use. So stepping back, let's look at the strategic picture here. The U.S., as I've noted before, is trying to really focus more on the Western Hemisphere as part of its sphere. Venezuela is where the heaviest outside influence is occurring right now. A very close security relationship between Russia and Venezuela. Venezuelan crude is a key part of the oil economy and part of this, what I've called before, this axis of resistance consisting of China and Russia, Iran, and to a lesser extent, Venezuela and some other proxies. And so it might look on the face that, this regime that's in our hemisphere and has very close ties to a security threat, Russia, we should overthrow that regime or topple them. And I understand that impulse, but we have to think, is there a better way to go about this that doesn't lead to potential downsides? And the potential downsides here are you create anti-Americanism within Venezuela. There's several within Venezuela, and that leads, let's say, 10, 20 years down the road into a revolution with a regime that's even less friendly to the U.S. And a case for that is actually Iran, because back in the 50s, they nationalized Anglo and American oil companies under the Mossadegh government, and we overthrew that government and reinstalled a monarchy. And then 20 years later, we get the Islamic Revolution and the radical regime that's still in place now. And I don't think anyone would argue that that was the better outcome. So you got the blowback potential, and now you got the potential of diplomatic blowback, because now you got countries in Latin America that now they're nervous. If we cross the sky, are we going to get removed too? And there's two reactions to that. Either you capitulate to the United States, or you try to put your eggs in different baskets. And right now, Latin America its biggest trade partner already right now is China. And then there's this big trade deal that was signed between Mercosur, which includes Brazil, Argentina, Colombia, and Peru, I think. I'm not sure. The four countries, the big one, Brazil, have signed a giant free trade deal with the European Union, which we have made increasingly more hostile to us. So I don't think that's a good thing either. And then there's the more abstract, you're undermining international law, and you're basically saying that there's a weaker country next to you and you want control over it for your security purposes or whatever, you can take it over. And, you know, now China's eyeballing Taiwan probably. Um, and so it also gives us perception that the US is acting rogue. So it's kind of like now I'm thinking of the big picture, the diplomatic game here. Now China and Russia is looking and they're saying, you know, they already want to reduce US influence in the world. That's fine. But now they're saying, okay, now they're starting to make all these other countries mad. They're alienating South America, Latin America, Canada. So let's expand these ties. And now these other countries that were formerly US allies may look to China and say, well, you know, we don't really like the way they run their country internally, but they're not out here trying to bully us and trying to use military action to coerce us. And so you see this gradual US isolation that I think will come from that. So not only are you getting this tremendous downside, I would say the upsides of what Trump did to Maduro are very minimal. You know, I think it was a good idea to enforce sanctions on Venezuelan oil. You know, I think actions short of war to constrain the regime because, again, the Russian influence were good. But you could accomplish that with a blockade. You don't need to overthrow the government. And they were already blockading the oil anyway. So I don't understand why taking this extra step helps. Now you're moving on to, okay, you just want to have a puppet regime, which again makes a lot of countries in the region nervous. But let's say, okay, I want a puppet regime. Now we've overthrown him, and now we don't have troops on the ground. So how are you going to get your puppet? You know, we put in Maduro's VP, or Maduro's VP is president now, and Venezuela isn't like, it's not like Saddam Hussein. It's not like a singular authoritarian dictatorship. It's not like you can cut the head off and the whole thing falls apart. There's a whole internal security, military, political one-party apparatus of which Maduro was kind of, I mean, he was on top, but they can get rid of him and then roll in another person, the regime carry on just the same as it was. All I see here is a knee-jerk reaction that, and a desire to overthrow the regime in Venezuela that I don't think is connected to really any U.S. policy interest. And I think it actually has undermined U.S. soft power and international law and credibility. And the effects of that won't be immediate, but again, this is going to be a long-term deal, and it fits part a very concerning pattern by the U.S. government.